In the year 2000, what had long been considered an unreplaceable car was finally replaced with the launch of the new Mini, a project decades in the making that had been taken on and off the shelf by BMC, British Leyland, and finally the Rover Group, refreshing a timeless design built to match the challenges of an austere era, but making it suitable for the market of the 21st century. However, developing the new Mini during the 1990s would prove to be an exercise in pettiness, confusion, and widespread indecision, with near-constant arguing between Rover and BMW, leading to lengthy delays and a general lack of clarity as to what direction the project should go, so much so that it was very much a miracle that the new Mini was ever released at all. The original Mini, as launched in 1959, was built to answer a dire need for fuel-efficient cars due to the rations imposed by the 1956 Suez Crisis, with Sir Alec Issigonis delivering what could only be described as a work of automotive genius, as he was able to put comfort, style, practicality and performance into a machine that stood at no more than 10 feet long. In a roundabout way, the Mini's exceptional success also proved to be its greatest weakness, as rather than going through conventional model cycle times of every 5 to 8 years, as per later rivals, the Mini was used as very much a stable income for the original British Motor Corporation and later British Leyland, with the management seeing the car's healthy sales as a sign that there was no imperative to replace a model clearly doing so well commercially. Therefore, Mini replacements would emerge and disappear multiple times over the decades, starting in 1968 with Issigonis' own proposed replacement dubbed the BMC 9X, followed later that same year by the Barrel Mini, which formed the basis of the later ADO 74 that was ultimately cancelled, the Innocenti Mini, a thoroughly modern facelift exclusively built and sold in Italy from 1974 that was not brought back to the UK on cost grounds, and the ADO 88 of 1977, which would eventually become the Austin Metro of 1980. What the Austin Metro itself was meant to be the ultimate replacement of the Mini, a lack of confidence in the Metro's ability to sell widespread on both the domestic and international markets, meant Chairman Sir Michael Edwards made the strategic decision to keep the Mini in production until such a time that the Metro could sustain itself commercially, thus justifying the Mini's discontinuation. However, what resulted instead was the Mini stealing sales from the Metro, and thus forming a self-fulfilling prophecy that the Metro had not the commercial viability to stand on its own 2 feet, and thus the Mini remained in production alongside the Metro, with the Metro being a domestic hit but failing internationally, while the Mini maintained its universal appeal globally. By the beginning of the 1990s, the need to replace the Mini was becoming increasingly pressing, with the original A-Series engine, that was still being produced after 30 years, being considered unlikely to pass forthcoming EU emissions regulations and drive-by noise ratings, while in the product lineup, the K-Series engine had been brought in to replace it, meaning it was becoming uneconomical to maintain assembly exclusively for the Mini. Passive safety was also becoming more of an issue with buyers, it becoming very obvious that increasingly stringent safety testing and the requirements for airbags, as per the upcoming Euro NCAP safety rating system, could not be accommodated by the aged Mini, while at the same time production was exceptionally labour-intensive, with every car having to be essentially hand-built on the Longbridge assembly lines. With these looming problems, combined with the need to also replace the decade-old Metro, Gordon Sked asked his design team to forward proposals for a new Mini during 1993, with the Canley Design Studios proposing that their replacement for the Mini also worked to replace the Metro in the lineup as well, finally removing the needless duplication that had existed between the two models. The task of replacing the Mini was a phenomenal one, and thus Sked encouraged the designers to not be constrained by current thinking, and be as adventurous as they liked, with concepts being soon drawn up, though it soon became apparent that designers David Staddington and David Woodhouse could see the potential for an entire range of Mini models to be created. Indeed, it was the creation of David Woodhouse that was winning the most plaudits within Rover, proposing a 3-seater city car with a McLaren F1-style centre driving position, this model being considered so seriously by the Rover management that a Metro-based design mule was assembled to demonstrate it, while at the same time, the K-Series engine and hydrogas suspension were continuing to prove their worth in the Rover Metro, and thus the possibility of using them in the new Mini was granted serious investigation. Engineers at Gaydon created a Mini prototype, nicknamed the Minky, which was essentially an interconnected hydrogas-suspended Mini and powered by a 3-cylinder Japanese K-car power unit with a 660cc displacement, with the engineers reportedly being pleased with the prototype, with Dr. Alex Moulton commenting that the Mini could achieve larger car levels of handling and ride using intelligently configured versions of hydrogas. However, as the new Mini was being developed, Rover, having been under the ownership of British Aerospace since 1988, was offloaded to BMW during 1994, the takeover process delaying continued development of the new Mini, as every part of the forward planning department was investigated by the German car maker to ensure its viability going into the future, including the Mini replacement. Thankfully, BMW CEO and architect of the BMW Rover deal, Bernd Pichetsrieder, was highly enthusiastic of a Mini replacement project, with Pichetsrieder himself having a deep personal connection with the Mini, as he was both a major British car enthusiast, but also the great-nephew of original Mini designer Sir Alec Isagonis, and thus he made it clear that the British design team could continue to manage their own scheme independently. Pichetsrieder also made it clear that he was happy with the portfolio of Mini models also being proposed, and in an act of solidarity for this new scheme, gave the project official backing under the codename R59, while also bringing aboard surviving members from the original ADO15 Mini design team of the 1950s, John Cooper, Jack Daniels and Alex Moulton, all of whom were eager to get involved. By late 1994, Project R59 was beginning to take shape, though despite Pichetsrieder's vow that Rover's design teams could proceed with the R59 independently, stylists in Germany were also busily working on styling proposals for the new car, and from this BMW and Rover took radically different approaches as to how a Mini for the 21st century should look. Rover's key initiative was to produce a car with the same sense of radicalism, with David Saddington, freshly promoted to the role of MG and Mini design director following his successful work on the R3, being keen to follow in the footsteps of Isagonis, with his team working on a 10-foot-long four-seater Mini, while David Woodhouse and Oliver Legris, another designer who had worked on the 1993 project, were highly conscious of the fact that the new Mini needed to be an economy car, a performance car and a fashion icon, but to put all three into the same vehicle would likely result in a convoluted mess. BMW, on the other hand, under Chris Bangle, employed both their Munich and California design studios to create a new Mini Cooper, intending to eschew any desire to simply be a facelifted original Mini, and instead be what the styling team considered to be a natural evolution of the Mini had it undergone the regular cycle of upgrades as per the likes of long-running cars such as the Porsche 911, with this project gaining the backing of BMW director Wolfgang Reitzler. By 1995, it was time for the management to choose the direction of the new Mini, with Rover presenting a model that incorporated a K-series engine, subframes and hydrogas suspension, while BMW in Munich proposed an alternative that comprised a Z-axle at the rear and McPherson struts up front, with both machines adopting radically different styling cues, either in favour or against harking back to the 1959 classic. As the year wore on and both teams continued development of their own versions of the Mini, it was becoming obvious that very soon BMW would have to ditch one of the design office's ideas and put their full weight behind the other, with October 15, 1995, seeing Rover and BMW designers meet up at the Heritage Motor Centre to present their rival full-scale proposals. Rover bought 3 cars for display, while BMW brought between 3 and 6, the Rover cars being dubbed the Evolution, the Revolution and the Spiritual, with the Evolution being essentially a mini facelift in stylistic terms, while the Revolution and Spiritual adopted a look that was vaguely reminiscent of later revivals of the Fiat 500. The Spiritual was also shown in long wheelbase form in order to demonstrate its adaptability for a larger package, with these cars being dubbed the Mini and Midi for display, though ultimately, BMW's models presented a more sporting image that, apart from minor retro detailing, paid little homage to the original, with the final verdict coming down to a decision by Pichetsrieder, Reitzler and the Rover board, with the general consensus being that the favoured models were those of Frank Stevenson and David Saddington. The overall feeling was that the Mini should be a contemporary and conventional small car with a retro sporting appeal, and while Pichetsrieder was impressed with many of the concepts, he considered that they were perhaps too far ahead of their time, and that the new Mini had to be a simple, practical little car with mass-market appeal. While the Rover management sought to champion the Spiritual range as a way forward for the Mini, BMW considered that this machine did not accurately reflect the spirit of a Mini for the 21st century, though the Spiritual did endear the importance of the new Mini being a roomy car, as opposed to Stevenson's coupe-like proposals, though this led to several months of deliberation, as neither Rover nor BMW took preference with Saddington's or Stevenson's design. The question was eventually answered by Rover's design boss, Jeff Upex, who decided that Saddington would be the car's design chief, and Stevenson would report to him, though this process lacked clarity, and in the following months both Saddington and Stevenson would argue for each of their respective design changes, though Wolfgang Reitzler would ultimately cast the deciding ballot and come down on the side of Frank Stevenson. However, the difficulty was that, in the background of this uncertainty over the packaging of the new Mini, the project management and engineering was now being handled by BMW, with Stevenson, a BMW employee working within Rover, now being viewed with a significant level of suspicion, thus causing much infighting between BMW and Rover that was proving to be counterproductive, leading, in May 1996, to the entire project being handed back to Rover under the codename R50, with the project direction now under Chris Lee. The handover of the new Mini to Rover led to severe resentment within the ranks of BMW, with BMW's development chief, Burkhard Goschel, rushing this process unnecessarily against Chris Lee's request for 6 weeks in order to gather the necessary team and get the project up and running again, which Goschel declared that all work in Munich had come to a halt already, thus resulting in no logical transition period. Therefore, in BMW's haste to offload the R50 onto Rover, it was found by the Gaydon design team that many parts of the project were unfinished or in a state of disarray, inheriting a BMW platform, as defined in 1995, that featured struts up front and a Z-axle at the rear, while the engine and gearbox had yet to be decided, though more significant was the fact that no one had told Moulton and BTR Development that their work on the Mini was no longer required. Much of the harshness shown to Moulton came down to the fact that his second Mini-based prototype, the Minky 2, was proving more than capable than either of Rover or BMW's concepts, with the great irony being that it had been alongside BMW engineers that this mule had taken shape, and with the fitting of a K-series engine, it was also proving to be a more than effective tool, with the Minky 2 meeting all the targets asked of it by BMW, but this meant nothing when Moulton was dismissed from the project in September 1996. By the end of that year, the project was proving to be something of a poisoned chalice for Rover, and when it became apparent that BMW would not tolerate any slippage in the project despite the handover from Munich, the process became more and more difficult, with Rover being hamstrung by the need to learn the new chassis using an R&D centre that was minuscule in comparison to BMW's. Because of this, a second team was set up in Munich, who would act as a resource for Rover to call upon during the development of the new car, but this proved to be only a shadow team that were not helpful in their contributions to the project at Rover, acting more as go-betweens for Gaydon and Munich, with Chris Lee finding himself in an increasingly turbulent position as he attempted to arbitrate between the two sides, instead of actually managing the R50 forwards. The other problem that Rover was encountering was the fact that Wolfgang Reitzler had frozen the R50 styling, despite the engine and gearbox having yet to be confirmed, with Saddington having expressed concerns that using the existing low-bonnet line would be too tight for the K-series engine, but BMW instead stated that the K-series unit was at fault, complaining that this engine had not a space-efficient package, despite it working perfectly well inside the similarly sized Metro. The situation continued to be highly frustrating for the Rover engineers, who were now on a decidedly need-to-know basis from their opposites in Munich, with matters coming to a head when Reitzler announced that BMW and Chrysler would co-develop a new engine for the Mini from a factory in Brazil, shattering Rover's preconception that, even with the tight space under the bonnet, the proven K-series was still the preferred choice. Beyond the resentment of the K-series being sidelined as a logical replacement for the A-series, as development continued, further issues emerged, with there being no room in the Mini's engine compartment for a conventional two-shaft gearbox, with BMW desiring the use of a Getrag gearbox, against the wishes of the Rover team for an R65 gearbox, who cited the R65 being £100 cheaper per car, more compact, and having no inherent cyclic vibrations, thus negating the need for a mass damper, while it was also being already produced at Longbridge and had been proven in other Rover Group front-wheel drive cars. Chris Lee and his team stuck to their convictions, produced rafts of evidence regarding costs, performance and service experience, while back-to-back tests, evaluations on the road and comparisons of torque capacities were all made, this being in addition to major improvements to the R65's change quality, a reduction of free play, and healthy attention to warranty claim records were all needed before Rover's R65 won the argument. In terms of marketing and sales of the Mini, as early as 1998, it was clear that BMW wanted the car for itself to sell through its own channels, rather than through the often fragmented Rover dealer network, with Didier Maitre, president of BMW France, declaring that via BMW dealers, the Mini could receive a higher premium of 90,000 francs, while Rover dealers expected a price tag of 70,000 francs, putting it on par with the pre-existing Rover 200. With BMW's strategy being to market the new Mini under the BMW umbrella as priced below the 3 Series Compact. During 1997, the first concept cars appeared in the form of the ACV30, which was announced at the Monte Carlo Rally, and presented a coupe style that sat on an MGF chassis and was based on a DreamWorks proposal for the car that had been shown at Gaydon during the development shootout between Rover and BMW in 1995. The ACV30 proved to be a statement of intent for the entire Mini project, publicly showcasing the fact that Rover was now seriously developing a Mini replacement, and while the ACV30 was far from being a finalised product, the Ivan Lampkin-styled interior would go on to form the basis of the cabin for the final production Mini, sporting a prominent centrally mounted speedometer and copious amounts of bare metal. The second concept car to appear was the Rover Spiritual at the 1997 Geneva Motor Show, this proposal from Oliver Legris being displayed in both compact and extended form, of the Spiritual 1 and Spiritual 2 respectively, and though the reaction in Geneva proved to be somewhat lukewarm, the original thinking behind the design would come to form the basis of general design principles across the wider industry going forward. However, even with concept cars now being released for public display during 1997, Rover at Gaydon was encountering communications problems with the Shadow team in Munich, with Chris Lee still finding that BMW seemed to be hindering the progress of the project, with one example being Rover's proposal to replace the rear disc brakes with drum brakes based on cost savings, to which Reitzler reluctantly agreed, only to find weeks later that BMW had secretly vetoed that decision and were not engineering drum brakes at all. Ultimately, the ingrained problems of competitiveness and a lack of communication between Gaydon and Munich forced Bernd Pichetsrieder to hire consultancy firm Unicorn to step in and arbitrate between the two sides, with two advisors being dispatched to Gaydon, though their advice came simply that Rover should stop trying to understand BMW and abide by their dictation. Nevertheless, the project continued, with the 1997 Frankfurt Motor Show seeing a mock-up presented that was basically identical to what the final production Mini would look like, though the reality was that the car was still a very long way off production readiness, with this mock-up being based on a Fiat Punto, though regardless, the reactions were far more positive to anything garnered by the ACV30 or Spiritual concepts, thus giving BMW and Rover more enthusiasm to get the project completed. As the car's development entered its final stages, prototypes were built and road testing was undertaken, with the new Mini, based on the notion that it was primarily a BMW effort, spending large amounts of time undergoing trials on the Nürburgring in Germany, a location famous for where BMW development engineers had honed their production chassis to perfection. Meanwhile, Longbridge was the chosen factory to build the new car, with a brand new assembly line being built for new Mini production, though by contrast, Burkhard Gerschel removed Chris Lee from the project, replacing him with Peter Morgan, while on the wider corporate stage, Pichetsrieder and Reitzler would both resign from BMW, following long-standing disputes over the running of the Rover Group and its inability to remain competitive despite millions of pounds of BMW money being injected into the firm. The resignation of Pichetsrieder, as the biggest advocate for Rover's general independence when it came to developing its own models, essentially sidelined the firm from the new Mini, and Heinrich Petra was installed as project director, who rapidly oversaw all responsibility for the scheme be stripped from Rover and placed firmly back in the hands of BMW. As a result of this, in June 1999, the final development of the car was undertaken by BMW, with most of the 30 development engineers who had worked on the car for the previous 3 years deciding to stay in England with Rover, all while BMW, after spending millions on the upkeep of Rover, was attempting to formulate an exit strategy to offload Rover to the Alchemy Group. By the turn of the new millennium, the new Mini was only weeks away from launch, with BMW preparing to start production on the new assembly line at Longbridge, and expected that the car would go on sale for January 2001, though this was all shattered during February 2000, when BMW executives ordered all Mini computer files to be downloaded to German hard drives before announcing that the partnership between Rover and BMW had been dissolved, and the new Mini would be brought to the market by BMW alone. Amid the chaotic breakup of the Rover Group by BMW during 2000, John Towers, heading the Phoenix Consortium, which sought to take the bulk of the Rover and MG firm off BMW's hands, pleaded that the new Mini should remain under British control and start its production run at Longbridge as originally planned. BMW, however, were beyond negotiation on the matter of the Mini, and with the company realizing how much of a potential hit the Mini could be, this brand would remain under German control, with the production facility being instead located at the former Morris factory in Cowley on the recently vacated assembly lines of the Rover 75, which itself had been transferred to the proposed new Mini lines at Longbridge. Through it all, though, the launch of the new Mini remained on schedule, and at the 2000 Paris Motor Show on September 28th, the model would burst onto the scene, with the entire BMW management team being present at the show to introduce the car, with the presence of the most senior Joachim Milberg and Dr. Helmut Panker, proving the company's commitment to the revival of this most cherished of car marques, while Burkhard Gerschel and Frank Stevenson fielded any questions about the product itself. The Mini would arrive on the UK market in July 2001, accompanied by an innovative marketing campaign that was pitched directly at a younger demographic of well-to-do urbanites, whose parents took the original Mini to their hearts in the 1960s, with the term Mini Adventure being well established by the end of the year as new Minis disappeared out of the showrooms in their thousands. While the car received near universal acclaim for its comfort, practicality and road manners, often being cited as one of the best front-wheel drive cars on the market, the new Mini faced inevitable and unflattering comparisons to the original Mini, being described as far too big and bemoaned as a German perversion of a timeless British institution, while criticism was also aimed at the Chrysler engine, which at 116 horsepower was considered underpowered for a car weighing 1.3 tons. Nevertheless, the newly renamed BMW Oxford factory in Cowley was quickly up to full production capacity, and it remained so throughout the first 5 years, churning out 700,000 examples in that brief period, and thus leading to a second-generation Mini being launched in late 2006 that retained much of the car's charm and style, while the unimpressive Chrysler engine was replaced by a range of BMW PSA power plants, although the supercharged option disappeared. Today, the Mini brand under BMW has spawned a vast array of variants and options that has made this marque one of the most popular and sought after in the world, its many derivatives including the original 3-door hatchback, 5-door hatchback, convertibles, roadsters, 5-door crossover SUVs, vans, and even a subcompact executive estate car, demonstrating the innate flexibility of the Mini's design while still largely retaining the same winning aesthetic as relaunched in 2000. As for the original Mini, this would end production on October 4, 2000, after 41 years and 5,387,862 units, with the last example, a red Cooper Sport, immediately going for preservation, while the MG Rover company, following the loss of both the original Mini and the new Mini, was left selling generally unpopular cars, while also being dogged by a poor forward planning strategy and asset stripping by the management, eventually leading to the company's demise in April 2005. Ultimately, the new Mini has proven that lightning can strike twice for a sound concept, with the revived and refreshed marque continuing to match the needs of modern customers, despite ongoing criticisms that these machines barely carry over the spirit of the original Mini, and are instead large generic hatchbacks that have settled alongside its contemporaries such as the Fiat 500 and the Ford Fiesta. In truth, the new Mini, like the original, was developed to answer the needs of its time, with the original being a masterclass of economy, practicality and style that was directly resultant of the fuel-starved era of the 1956 Suez Crisis, while in line with increasing needs for comfort, functionality and size, the new Mini was developed to answer this market, but added a touch of retro-styled flair to help both endear it to new audiences, while retaining a connection to the charm of the original model.